Recently, we had the pleasure of watching the Caine Mutiny, which is a movie that takes place on a World War II minesweeper ship called the Caine. This ship was never used in battle much. It was just kind of sitting there. It was like it had never been used before. It was just there to have as a backup. So this led to the crew members and everybody on the ship. They were very laid back, kind of lazy, disorganized, didn't really care because they knew that all their work on the ship was just to keep the ship floating and out of the water. And they knew that it wasn't really going to be used for anything, so that was kind of where their heads were at. So the movie starts off by following Keith, who has just finished his training with the U.S. Navy and has just been assigned to the ship as a captain. And Keith gets on the ship and he is very disappointed. It was not at all what he was expecting. He was expecting some grand, organized, clean ship. And so he walks onto the Caine and he's kind of like, what is this? What's going on? This is not at all what I was looking forward to. This is not what I pictured whatsoever. So he's not happy with this. He actually ends up eventually telling the captain himself that he is not happy with how things are being run and that he does not agree at all with how the captain is running things whatsoever. But this ends up blowing over pretty quickly because not long after that, that captain ends up leaving the ship and is replaced by Captain Queeg, who becomes a huge part of the movie. And from almost the second he stepped on board, Captain Queeg was a hot mess. It was a train wreck. Nothing was going according to plan. He immediately starts barking orders at everybody. He sits the captains down, or he sits all of the officers down his first day and says, we are going to start following exactly by the book. I want everybody to know every single rule in there. It's either the right way, the wrong way, the Navy way, or my way, and we're doing it my way. So he says we're going to follow the book exactly. Everybody needs to have their shirt tail tucked in. Everybody needs to have their gear on. So he's he knows what he wants to do, and he knows exactly how he wants to do it. So the first day they decide to run a drill, and he immediately is yelling at everybody, especially Keith, because of everyone has their shirt tail tucks out, and nobody has helmets or gear on, so he's yelling at Keith the whole time, basically. And I think this relates to how we learned about motivation in this class, because he was very motivated to get everybody in line. He basically wanted to turn the ship around. He wanted to turn everybody's motives around and get everybody back on track, staying organized, doing things how the Navy regulations want them to do it. So I think he was very motivated to get the ship back on track. He wanted everybody to do it the right way. And I think he also wanted the crew members to be more motivated, because at first they would just kind of walk around with their shirts off. They were just half doing their jobs because again they knew it didn't really matter. So he wanted them to be more motivated to do their work, and he wanted them to care about their work because he cared about his work and he cared about the ship and wanted it to do well. So I think that related a lot to motivation because, he was very motivated for what he wanted to do. So everyone is kind of getting used to this. It is way different than what they were used to with their old captain, because their old captain was very laid back. Obviously, he didn't really care about how things were run. He didn't care how everybody did things as long as they got done. So this was a complete turnaround for everybody. They were not used to this whatsoever. So everybody's starting to get used to it a little bit. But then comes the strawberry incident. So a couple days in, after dinner, all the crew members on the ship decide to have strawberries and ice cream for dessert. And that night, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. Keith is up on the top deck doing lookout, and he gets called down for an officers meeting immediately in Queeg's office, or the conference room. And they're what could he be calling a meeting about right now? It's 1 o'clock in the morning. What is going on? So they get down there and they basically find out that Queeg is upset about the missing strawberries. He says he's convinced that somebody stole them. So he has one of the crew members sit there and count out scoops of sand for every single serving of strawberry that everybody on the ship had, to show exactly how many scoops of strawberries are missing and how many servings are missing. So he is convinced that somebody's stolen these strawberries, and he is now convinced that somebody on the ship went and had a key made, a spare key of the freezer door, so that they could go in and steal the extra strawberries. So Keith, Keever, and Merrick, they're all sitting there. They're kind of like, what is he going on about? Like, what is he talking about right now? Why would somebody make an extra key to go steal some strawberries? Like, that's kind of ridiculous. So they don't believe it. They try to talk him out of it. And he is just having none of it. He's like, no, I know there's a spare key. I want a full investigation on my desk by 8 a.m. Like, he is telling people, he's like, I want everybody talked to. I want you to run full investigation, and I want a full report back to me by 8 a.m. So, again, they're all kind of looking at him like he's crazy, but they don't want to say anything in fear of getting in trouble, so they kind of just leave it be, and they, like, do what he asks them to do. But they come back the next morning, and they have no report. They're like, nobody has seen the strawberries. Everybody's storage checks out. Like, nobody has seen a key or heard anything about it. But Queeg is still not convinced. He is still convinced that there's a key somewhere. So he then orders all the officers to basically flip the entire ship upside down. And he is like, you need to search everybody's rooms, you need to search everybody's clothes, you need to search all their belongings, because I know there's a spare key. So while this is all going on, I think we see multiple different types of the employees and like the crew members' reactions to negative work events, which is like a topic that we discussed in class, because I think a lot of the employees just showed like the loyalty reaction, meaning they just kind of stayed silent, they just hoped it would all blow over and that he would move on from it, and they just hoped like it would get better, it would move on. And then some of the officers, such as like Merrick, decided to go with the voice reaction, where they kind of try and talk Queeg out of it. They kind of try to tell him that like there is no spare key, that's not a thing, like nobody has seen anything, nobody would make a spare key just to go get the extra strawberries. So I thought it was kind of interesting to see that example in like real time, in a real situation, about how like different employees like decide to go with different reactions and how they both play out, and kind of like the reactions that they got from each of their reactions, if that makes sense. Like the loyal ones just kind of followed along, did what Queeg wanted them to do, and just kind of hoped it would blow over, while the voice reactions decided to like confront him and like obviously got like backlash for it, and he yelled at them and told them to just keep searching for it because he was convinced that this key existed. So then the whole strawberry incident eventually blows over, and then we move on to when the giant storm hits. The Caine gets caught in a giant storm. They're out in the middle of the ocean, and they have no idea what to do. They're just trying to keep the boat from going under, and the crew is like up in like where the like sails are and the wheel, and they're trying to ask Queeg, they're like, what do we do? How do we like, which way do you want us to do? Like, how do you want us to handle this? And he completely freezes over. He completely panics. He like just stays silent, just stands there staring at them, like staring off into space. And they're like trying to figure out what to do. They're like, which way do we turn the ship? Like, what do we do with the sails? What do we do with all the rest of the crew? Like, what do we do right now? How do we handle this? And Queeg is basically just completely blank staring, not handling the pressure at all whatsoever. And so this is when Merrick decides to relieve him of his duties, because, as we saw, he did not handle the stress well, which I found this also related to how we learned about stress in organizations, because sometimes you face stressful situations in the work environment, like it's going to happen, and it all depends on how you handle it. And this is an example of someone who did not handle the stress well, because he completely panicked, did not handle it well, and ended up being relieved of his duties because he didn't know what to do, and he just completely folded under the pressure. And he even ended up getting upset that he was relieved from his duties, but they had to tell him, like, we had no choice, you did not handle it well. Like, stress can be, like, very hard to deal with, and he just did not handle it in a good way, as we saw. So, overall, I think this movie is related to the study of organizational behavior in many ways. I think it showcased various aspects of OB and how we see it in the workplace and how it can be shown in real-life situations. I think this is a very good example. Like, I think this movie is very good at showing, like, students like myself how all these examples can be seen in the real life and, like, experiences that we may have to face. And I think it gives us a much better idea of, like, how to handle these situations and the kinds that we might see in the working place and in the real world.